Zoe said, I'm a lawyer in my daily job. Are there any lawyers in the room? One, two. Okay. So at least, no, Zoe, you don't count. So at least there's some affinity. And so if things get a little hairy, hopefully I can lean on you to come to a colleague's defense. Okay. So a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for engaging in what I hope is going to be a far more interactive session than you will have either with the previous ones or the ones to come. And one of the things that I have learned in my years in leadership is mine is only one voice. And most of the times, the gems actually come from elsewhere. And all I have to do is to make sure that I give people the space to be able to express their voices, and mine is to listen, okay? And so the first thing that I'm going to do, where the topic for today is what will it take to remain at the pinnacle in these turbulent times, I want to flip that question back to yourselves, okay? And I suspect a number of you have already given it some thought. And has anyone not given it any thought? Okay, so you've all given it some thought in some shape or form. Now, when I mentioned to my firm that I was coming to this occasion, there's a lady standing there who's our COO. And the pads that have just now been distributed, the writing pads, she was very keen to actually find out that they go to the right place that I said I was going to. And so that's why she's here, okay? And the reason why we gave those out is I'm gonna start with an icebreaker. And our icebreaker will take us between 15 and 20 minutes. And don't you ever say to me, but 15, 20 minutes is quite a long time for an icebreaker. There's a lot of ice to be broken, okay? So here's the exercise that we're going to do. For exactly 4 minutes, I want you to write down two things only, that in your view, you think are what it will take to remain at the pinnacle. And then here's the reason why I'm insisting that you write it down. Now, I've already said I'm a lawyer by profession, and there's very little that I know of science, and I know marginally more about law, okay? But the little that I do know about science is that it tells us that where you engage your cognitive functions, which is your thinking, with your visual functions, which is your sight, plus your fine motor skills, which is the act of writing, the moment you do all of those three together, that's the time when you activate the most neural pathways in your brain. And so that's why I want you to actually write and not type. And so I want you to use the time to write those two things. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes for that exercise. As soon as we're done with that exercise, so there's something for all of us to do here. So it's not just Mzi coming with his wisdom. Besides, there's not much wisdom that you're going to find with him, okay? So once you're done, I'm going to break you up into groups, okay? Now, I happen to have found you sitting as you are. So you're not going to move. So the groups that you will be is in groups of 3, and if 3 becomes more than 3, then you break up into 2s, okay? So when you're done, you're going to talk to the person or the persons in the group that you're with. So in this row, for example, it will be the 3 of you and the 2 of you. Now, please don't be like lawyers and start arguing. Why is it not the 3 of you and the 2 of you? Just go with me, okay? And so the aim of that exercise is once you've written your 2 things, you are then going to discuss them with the members of your group. And here's the importance of that exercise. A, you must now let someone else know what it is that you think. And when that exercise is done, that person that you're letting know must similarly be highly attentive and listening to what you're saying. And here's why they need to be listening. Because when we're done with that exercise, okay, we are going to have a feedback session from some of you to the entire group. So if the person in your group that was speaking, you weren't listening to them, you're going to be exposed and exposed very quickly. Why? Because they're right here next to you. They'll say, that's not what I said. Okay? So you need to be listening. Okay? And so this lady here is very, very strict with her time. So that first exercise of the writing down, 3 minutes is what we're going to give you for that exercise. So we start the clock now, Zoe. 3 minutes. You're writing down 2 things. Are we all clear? Okay.
You've got 1 minute left.
That sounds like a lot. So you know the exercise, break up into groups. I see there's some of you who are sitting single, so you're going to have to move, unfortunately. So the ladies, if you don't mind, perhaps the 3 of you can form a very quick JV there. So no time for chit-chatting. Let's get on with it, right? Right. And so we are now at the feedback stage, okay? Feedback stage, the talking is now done. So here's what we're going to do. I am very happy to take volunteers, and let me just say, I would far rather people volunteer, okay? Why? Because I actually don't mind pointing people out. And I can assure you, there's an old trick that I used to use when I was on campus. I would avoid sitting at the front, and having avoided sitting at the front, wherever I would sit, I would avoid eye contact with the lecturer. That stuff doesn't work with me. I've been there, done that, so let's get volunteers. Yes, ma'am. Oh, plenty volunteers. You see what happens when you just egg people along. Let's start with you, ma'am.
We only volunteered because you're at the back.
So you knew what was coming, eh?
I'm just avoiding the eye contact. People always look to the back.
Perhaps if you don't mind, because I suspect a number of you don't know each other, right? And presumably a number of you are also from out of town. How many of you are from out of town? Okay, quite a few. So where do you all of you come from, if I may ask?
I'm from Whittlesea, Eastern Cape.
Whittlesea. Oh, all the way. How did you get here?
I made these.
Minutes. Okay. And the others? Stanley from Wow. Beautiful. My goodness me, eh?
I'm from Cape Town.
Cape Town. Wow. Is that why you were sitting alone there, eh? Okay. Now, here's the thing that I don't want any of you to lose out on. But for your selection on this program, you are going to meet and encounter people that you otherwise would have never met in your life, okay? And the thing that I want you to take away at the end, by the end of the program, make it your business to have met and interacted with someone that when you leave, you can continue the relationship. And then that, for me, is the biggest takeaway. Not what Mzi says or the previous speaker. Connect amongst yourselves and let the platform of this occasion be the thing that lets all of you connect. If that's the takeaway for me, you've achieved a lot more than any of us could have told you. So we had you volunteering, ma'am. Let's go.
Yes, my name is Yonela Njagaza. I'm also a Rhodes University alumni, by the way.
My, both of you. You know what? Is there something we can give those two ladies there?
Yes, actually. So basically, the question was, what does it take to remain at the pinnacle?
Yes.
And the first thing that I said was integrity and ethics. I combined those two.
But
because-
no. Where you are now losing the script. I actually don't want to know about what you said. So you must tell me about what she said. That's why you had to listen.
True.
So are you now regretting you volunteered?
No, I thought we spoke about what we both
No.
said. Okay.
When she volunteers, that's when she's going to speak about you.
What?
But you are the one who volunteered. Too late now.
Okay. So Spare spoke about the first thing she said, it was intentionality and consistency.
Okay.
So
Big words.
yes.
Now let's
yes.
unpack those.
Okay, so basically she combined those two because to be consistent, there's a level of intentionality that is also required. And so it's difficult to be consistent if you were not intentional to start with. Did I? Sure. I need to confirm.
Promise you, there is no need to confirm. The moment you stray, she will bring you back in line. So just carry on. You don't have too much time. Right?
Yes,
So,
and the second one is staying informed and keeping
Staying
engaged.
informed.
Staying informed
Okay.
and keeping engaged. So I also liken that to saying we can also speak to adaptability in that to say in this changing IR, AI and etc. If you're not informed, if you're not adapting or have a high adaptability quotient, then you run risk of becoming redundant and so forth.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, man. Seeing that you haven't said anything, I presume she represented you faithfully, right? Thank you. All the way from Cape Town. Aye, Cape Town first.
All right, hi guys. My name is Luke. So there were three of us. I was with Nomusa and Lilith,
So you're going to speak about both of them.
both of them, yeah.
Yes, thank
Because
you.
there was actually one that all three of us had, which was adapting to change.
Okay?
So, and I think that one is probably going to be a common thread because, change is inevitable. And, if you want to remain relevant, you have to, adapt to that change. And you need to keep yourself relevant with that change. But where we differed was, Nomusa mentioned...
Don't talk about the differences now. Just tell me what they say.
yeah.
Thank you.
So they say...
No, sir. No argument. Tell me what they say. Thank you.
All right, so all three of us mentioned adaptation. So with that, we were saying that staying informed as well is very important. Keeping adept with the changes in society, the changes in business and corporate, and the space that you're working within is very important. Nomusa then, with her second point, she mentioned, continuous development and embracing technology. Because, if you think about, for instance, I work in banking. If you look at where banking was 20 years ago and where it is now, it's completely different. If you still want things to be manual, for instance, your onboarding of your new clients and etc., you're going to get left behind, because the whole opening of a bank account now has gone from being an hour-long process to 20 minutes. So you need to adapt to new technologies to remain relevant, but also use those new technologies to solve for societal issues. Then Lilette mentioned remaining curious. So think of ways to work smarter, think of ways to solve for problems smarter, and that will keep you at the top of the pinnacle and relevant. Thanks.
Thank you. So the next one now, we've learned we've got to be a lot more cooperative with the facilitator, who is myself, because I don't brook dissent in this one. You must speak about what the group members told you, nothing else. So who's next? Yes, ma'am, you can.
Hi everyone, I'm Leletu. That's my traversing girlies. So I had the pleasure of working with Njabulo and Marco over here, and then Trishka joined us a little bit later. So what Njabulo actually said, he spoke on consistency, right? And what he said about consistency is that consistency is the one tool that stands the test of time. So I took that as a great takeaway. He also spoke about resilience.
Can you keep your comments out of it, please? Just tell me what they said.
Fine.
Thank you.
Forget about my comments.
You know, the problem with your comments is if you thought someone else actually made a rubbish point, then you're going to have to say to me, on this one. So just keep it neutral.
Got it, Z, got it.
There you go.
And resilience, yes, resilience. So actually having the courage to stand through the turbulence, right? Like being unshakable and being able to stand your ground through that. I'm not going to add what I think about it. And then Marco touched on collaboration and curiosity. So with collaboration, essentially just leveraging off the people that you've got around you, right? And being curious as to how do we solve for getting through this kind of hurdle that we're facing right now. So that was
Brilliant.
that.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the last one.
Okay.
On that note, so I had the pleasure of working with Dinewa and Doug.
I presume you've got a name. No, but tell us at least who you are, so at least we know who I'm talking to. And then you can tell us about the group.
Okay, cool. I am Ketsiwe Makubo. I am in the creative sector, so know nothing about law, except from Twitter.
Good for you, right? Aye. You could have left that one off. Okay.
So I had the pleasure of working with Doug and Dinewa. So Dinewa's perspective was around integrity, so doing the right thing when no one is watching. That's a key thing to, being, what was the question? Staying relevant. And then also long-term learning was a key thing for her, being able to keep up with, what's out there, learning about different things even outside of your sector. And then Lotang mentioned around data and insights and how that is important in order to know what's at the forefront and what to look out for. And then also the pursuit of moving people forward, and I asked her to unpack it, moving people forward.
Okay.
And I just asked her to unpack it, and it was all about, keeping the momentum, not stagnating, even when there is a problem and when the problem is overwhelming, keeping moving forward and keeping that progression going.
Brilliant. Thank you all so very much. That was absolutely awesome. Okay. Is there any one thing that any of you think absolutely needs to be brought to the fore before I move on? But I promise you, if you think it is and it turns out not to be, I'm going to let you know. Okay? Okay? No, you've already spoken. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm Tebogo Moema again.
Sorry, where's the mic? Okay.
Good morning again. I'm Tebogo Moema. So Thando here said remaining teachable is important, and also having an unlearning mindset. Being able to know that some behaviors, some things that you do, you need to let go of is very important to remain at the pinnacle. Thank you.
I can confirm that was definitely worth adding. Okay. And I'm starting to think some of you may have spoken with my colleague here and gotten a sense of what is Mzi going to tell us about, so that we can get it out ourselves and then let's get on with the rest of the day. Because genuinely, all of the things that, what's going on there? Okay, well, okay. if I'd simply come and shared with you some of my own perspectives, I was going to touch on each one of those. And so I'm going to give you some of my own perspectives. And even as I give you some of my own perspectives, I thought the place to start is to actually say to you, the simple answer that I bring to the question, what will it take to remain relevant in these turbulent times, is a simple, I don't know. That's my honest answer to you, okay? But I've obviously been around and I've got some impressions of how things might pan out. And so I'm going to do no more than share with you some of, admittedly, my impressions. I don't want anyone going out here and saying, what Mzi said, okay? It's impressions. And so the place where I start with unpacking all of us is to actually debunk parts of the question itself. Because, you know, when we talk about turbulence, there's a certain way that we tend to view what turbulence is. And the first place I thought to start is, any one of you who hasn't flown in an aeroplane? Wickelsie, I presume you flew here. Eh? Pasi is a thing like right? Okay, okay. So you get to a cruising altitude, and at a point, the pilot announces, we've now reached cruising altitude. They commence with the service, and life goes on. And without any notice, they suddenly come on, and they announce, we're about to hit turbulence, and if you can go back to your seats, and we'll suspend service for a short while. And then what do? As the English say, you gird your loins, okay? You fasten your seatbelt, and you wait it out, okay? That's our idea of turbulence, that it's some temporary stage that we go through, and then what? Guess what? Life reverts back to normal, okay? And so if you were to plot it on a graph, it would be a line with some inconsistencies and an occasional peak, and then back to the bottom, and it continues, and another peak, okay? And it is those peaks that we tend to associate with turbulence, okay? And my whole thesis is that which we regard as turbulence is actually the normal, okay? That's the normal. And the part that is absolutely abnormal is the constant, okay? And so the moment you start to recalibrate your own perceptions of turbulence is you start to bring a different mindset to how you engage with the question. And so that's where I start, okay? That turbulence is the new normal. And then there are a whole host of things that have contributed to where we are and how we got to accepting this turbulence as a state of hiatus, okay? And if you look at how societies have evolved and what are the things that have driven socio-political and economic developments, it's a combination of fast-moving urbanization, globalization, digitization. I'm not going to talk about all of those, but the pace at which all of those have happened have driven us to a place where turbulence is the new norm, okay? The things that, for me, are the biggest movers at this point in time, and I'm not going to spend too much time on these either, is if one looks at what's happening from a geopolitical standpoint. If we had this masterclass 2 weeks ago, okay, the world looked very different then to what it looks like today, okay? And in ways that none of us could have predicted. We simply didn't know, okay? And yet, here we are, 2 weeks later, it looks entirely different, okay? I don't know how many of you have followed what's happened with the NATO Alliance Conference at The Hague a few days ago, okay? The biggest resolution that came out of it was a commitment by each of those alliance members to increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP, okay? Now, whilst you may think, okay, it's 5% of GDP, and therefore what? Here's what it means. We are about to go back to that militarized industrial complex that the world was decades ago. Because with that amount of the world's resources being redirected to military spending, each of those amounts is amounts that would have otherwise been spent on other social projects. We are now redeveloping our military industrial complex. And that's what the world is going to look like. Do I, Mzi, have any clue what that's going to look like? I don't know. Okay? And so when someone mentioned the need for adaptability, I'm going to come to that theme in a moment, because those are the sorts of things that compel us to become that adaptable. The lack of knowledge about what's coming. And then for me, the biggest drivers, quite frankly, which are going to change our world in ways that none of us are simply incapable of comprehending, is the pace of technological development driven in the main by the advances in AI. And if you think what AI has done to us now, and so in your world, where you used to do something in an hour, you're now doing it in 20. With the developments that are happening now and others to come, there will be no need for human intervention. It's not going to be a reduction of time, okay? You are going to be interacting with chat boxes. That's where we go, okay? And unless you can look at your business, in our case, and ask yourself the question, how might this impact what it is that we're doing? And on a forward-looking basis, start to plan for that. You're going to be left behind, okay? And it's impossible to plan for something that you don't know. But at least you can start planning and you can start thinking about it. I don't know if you know the expression, if you fail to plan, it couldn't be more apt than where we are now. And then, of course, there's the advances as well with science and synthetic biology and what all of those might mean for us as a society. And once again, we simply do not know what all of that portends. But here's the catch. How many of you are familiar with the works of theologian Dr. James Carse, who wrote in the mid-80s about a concept that he called the finite game and the infinite game? One hand, okay? So if you bear with me, sir, but I've got my own take on how it all hangs together. Now, here's what James Carse wrote about the finite game. Or the finite and the infinite game, okay? The finite game, it's a game of known rules, a finite and known number of players with predetermined objectives, okay? So if you take a football match, okay, the rules are published. You may or may not agree with them, but everyone knows what the rules are, okay? There are a finite number of players. It's 11 players aside. And as a digression, if you have ever had the privilege of watching Orlando Pirates play, you might think they are playing with 13 players, but actually they are playing with 11, like the rest of everybody, okay? There is a finite objective, okay? It is one of three outcomes. It's a draw, it's a loss, or a win. There is no other permutation, okay? That's a finite game. We, however, in the game of life that we play, and in the game of business that we inhabit, live in the infinite game, okay? And the whole thesis about the infinite game, there is no determined number of players. Some players you don't even know, okay? The game of life has no finite number of players, okay? There are no rules. There are social conventions, but there are no rules, okay? And here is the kicker. The whole object of the game is to actually keep the game alive and to keep your place in the game so that you don't fall out, okay? That's the infinite game. The problem that people make, of course, they don't realize that they're in the infinite game, and they bring a finite game mindset to an infinite game. with predictable consequences. Okay? And now, if you imagine you are in this infinite game, in this world that is ever changing in ways that I've just described, what on earth must it take? And I've already told you what my whole thesis is on turbulence. That's the world that you now inherit, or rather you now inhabit. Okay? Thankfully, there are a couple of things that each of us can do. And time, unfortunately, doesn't permit that I go through all of that exhaustive list. So I'm going to leave you with some homework. And the one author that I highly recommend that each of you go and get that book, and having gotten it, read it, is a chap by the name of Ryan Holiday. Okay? And the name of the book is The Obstacle is the Way. Any of you read that book? Same gentleman here. He's obviously into these sorts of things. Okay? I cannot recommend it higher than any of the other ones that I'm going to recommend to you. Okay? Why? Because central to his theme is to break down in your own mind how you perceive the world. And when he says the obstacle is the way that we tend to view obstacles, we tend to think it's something to be overcome and get it behind you. And his whole thesis is that's actually the thing that's going to get you ahead, the obstacle. It's a very unconventional way of thinking. But where someone spoke about the need to be adaptable, okay? Unless you have a mindset that is easily embracing of change, okay? Change is going to leave you behind. The only thing better than being embracing of change is an ability to predict what change is coming, okay? And if you can do that, and then you can plan accordingly. And guess what? It doesn't matter if you don't get it right. But at least the mindset that you need to bring to bear is ask yourself the question constantly, where might this be going? And what are the sort of things that are going to be influencers in this direction? And what are the things that I can do to better position myself in that changing world? And if you can bring that mindset to bear, you are on your way to becoming a permanent inhabitant of that infinite game that I spoke about. Okay? There's two other things that I want to touch on because we are going to run out of time. And I did say to Zoe at the beginning, time is going to be our enemy because I also want to leave a few minutes for Q&A afterwards. The one other thing that I want to just mention very quickly is all of us as human beings are social creatures. That's the thing that distinguishes the rest of us from the animal kingdom. And if you want to read more about that, there's another author, Yuval Harari, who writes a book called Homo Sapiens. I can highly recommend it, okay? And the thing that makes us social creatures is we get the best out of ourselves by interacting with other human beings, okay? And now there are certain traits that you need to bring to the table when you interact with other human beings. And there are two authors, and you don't have to go and read up on these ones because they actually confuse even me. So Paul, I think it's Paul Babick and Robert Hare. They describe in personality trait which are the three things that all of us have, when I say have in common, that exists within each of our personality traits, okay? And they say it's the private, intrinsically, who are you? What are the things that make you tick, okay? It's the public, what is it that you put out to the rest of the world? And some of that is you amplify some of your private traits, and in other respects, you diminish some of your private traits, okay? And then there is what he calls attributed traits. And that is whatever you may do and whoever you may be, the world thinks of you in a certain way. That's attribution, okay? The holy grail, of course, is if you can match the private with the public, with the attributed. then you've achieved the Holy Grail, okay? But when I say to you, you don't have to go and read up on all of that. There's a whole scientific thesis that those authors outline about how all of this hangs together. They lose me along the way. And so I've developed my own, how I look at some of this. And that's the one that I want to share with you, okay? And mine is as simple as, I am a firm believer that each one of us are in absolute and in a permanent state of need of oxygen. And we all live with an oxygen reserve within us, okay? Even as you are sitting here, you are using that oxygen, okay? And there are three kinds of individuals that we interact with that impact that oxygen. When I say three, the one that I'm going to ignore for the moment, and it's an unfortunate one because I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, is there are people that you encounter that are completely neutral to your oxygen source. Completely, okay? To the point of indifferent. And so here's an example. Z decides he wants to sell his house. And I phone an estate agency. And the operator picks up. Good morning, you've come through to estate agent X. How can I help you? Yes, ma'am, my name is Mzi, and I'd like to speak to an estate agent. Hold on for a moment, and they play that funny music. And just when you think it's ending, it starts again. And then you get through to the estate agent. Now, guess what? That person who answered the phone, the minute you are now in touch with the estate agent, that person doesn't exist. And you know what? They never existed. You are never going to have occasion to ever think about them again. They are completely neutral to your oxygen levels. They actually do not exist. Okay? And so if you then take it a step further, I'm going to replay that exact same conversation with a slightly different nuance, with a different operator. Okay? Same phone call to the same estate agency. The answer is, hello, you're speaking to Zoe, and thank you for coming through to estate agent XY. How can I help you? Thank you, ma'am. My name is Mzi, and I'd like to sell my house. Oh, Mzi, what a momentous decision. Where do you live? And I tell them where I live, and they say, guess what? You've come to the right place. Let me see if Lee is available. Because Lee, I will let you know. She won't tell you herself. But Lee has sold the most number of houses in that suburb. I don't know how he's done it, but he's done it for 5 years in a row. She's done it for 5 years in a row. So if you don't mind holding on, I'm going to put you through to Lee. By the time that awful music comes on, all you're thinking is what Lee has just told you. Okay? And I promise you, even when the estate agent comes along and they're not telling you anything about themselves, Lee is already at the back of your mind. Now, picture that scene with the first example, okay? The first one doesn't exist in a mindset. They are gone, okay? And regardless of what the second one, of what the agent actually tells you, Lee is a permanent feature in your mind. There's an example of how someone impacts your oxygen levels, and it doesn't take anything, okay? That's not the kind of person that I want to speak about, however. The two kinds that I want to speak about are those people that give you energy, and you've got a diary appointment coming up, and you're seeing Z at 10 o'clock tomorrow, and you know what? You cannot wait, okay? And why? Because you know it's set for an hour, it's going to be 2 hours. And by the time you get home, and you promised your wife, your husband, your partner, love you, I'll be home by 4, you're only back home at 6, they think, you bastard, what were you up to? And no amount of telling them, but I was with him, Z, is going to convince them, okay? Why? Because he gives you oxygen, okay? And then conversely, there are people where you answer, you look at your phone when it rings, and it says Mzi, and you think, oh my gosh, okay? And you have this quick debate in your mind. Cheapers, when was the last time I spoke to him? What is he going to talk to me about now? And thankfully, you know, the way that the phones are programmed, it rings for a certain number of minutes and goes to voicemail. and then it stops ringing, and you think, God, okay? Except it rings again, okay? And this time, your conscience simply will not allow you. And so you answer it. And Z doesn't even say hello, okay? You won't believe what so-and-so did. Can you? And 10 minutes later, your hand is starting to wane, okay? You put it on speaker and you leave it on the table, and they are still going on, okay? And by the time the phone ends, you have seen your oxygen levels plummet, okay? And at the end of that call, you place your hands on your head and you think, oh my gosh, okay? And on the other end of the phone, Z's got a spring in his step and he thinks, you know, that lady, she's such a good lady. I could phone her about anything and she's got time for me, okay? You know what happened there? They stole your oxygen, okay? And then here's the catch whenever I tell the story. People always rush to think to themselves, and they go through their mental Rolodex, okay? And they think, no, who are the thieves and who are the ones that give me oxygen? That's actually not the aim of the story, okay? The aim is a far more different one. And that is, I want each of you to introspect. Look in the mirror and ask yourself the question, of those in that bifurcation, where do I fall? Okay? There's two questions I want you to ask yourself. Where do I fall? Okay? And do the exercise honestly. Okay? Here's the far more important bit. Having done the exercise, the far more important question to ask yourself is, why am I placing myself where I'm placing myself? What is the impact that you think you are having on people that you otherwise, or that otherwise places you in whatever is the station that you place yourself in? I'm not going to suggest that you phone up your friends and you ask them, dude, what do you think? That's a bit cheesy, okay? And you know what? Everyone will tell you you give them oxygen, okay? Do that exercise and see where it comes out. And what I want to leave you with is, if it comes out that you're a giver of oxygen, okay? Those are the people that will remain in that infinite game that I described at the beginning, okay? And the last part that I want to segue to, and before I segue to that, I run a law firm, as Zoe said, and we fall under the subset of professional services firms. And one of my favorite authors on professional services is a gentleman by the name of David Meister. And he's written a seminal book called Trusted Advisor, and I reread it from time to time to this day, okay? And there's a part in that book where he says, all of us, and especially the educated lot, we have a habit of writing at the end of our names our professional qualifications, okay? Mgudlwa and Zoe told you mine, and then I write them at the end, okay? And I send the letter, okay? And the thing that he says is, and I want you to listen very carefully, the world doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care, okay? And so if in your interactions with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your clients, with your suppliers, you bring a level of care, empathy, and attention to them, they will reward you richly. And that's the thing to be constantly aware of, okay? And then the last part that I want to rifle through very quickly, because I am mindful of time. And Zoe there is starting to, I can see she's starting to get a little, you know, she was going to send me these subtle reminders. She's now getting a little excitable, okay? So the last part that I cannot but touch on is excellence. Because ultimately, howsoever you behave on the other attributes that I spoke about, you have to bring your best self to the table, okay? And then once again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the technical definition of excellence, but there's a work that I can highly recommend to you. Have you read John Gardner's book on excellence? I'm disappointed. Oh, what happened? Hey? Okay. So John Gardner has got a book titled Excellence. Can we be excellent and equal to? Highly recommend it. Okay. What I'm not going to do is to take you through what he writes, but I want to tell you a story about a famous painter, Picasso. All of you know Picasso, celebrated artist, and his works are collector's items, and in fact, you can't get hold of any of them at this stage, okay? And so the one day, he's ambling to the market, and Picasso is used to people coming up to him and saying, "Oh, Picasso, such a fan of your works, and thank you very much," and he goes on. And so this one day, he encounters this tourist who comes up to him and says, "Mr. Picasso," he says, Pablo, man, I'm such a fan of your work. Is there any universe where you can, on a very rough basis, do a quick sketch of me?" Picasso says, "Ma'am, with the greatest of pleasure. It might cost you a little bit, but I'm very happy to." And so she sits on the pavement, and he whips out his canvas, and he starts painting. And he never looks once at what he's doing. He's focused on her. And at the end, he takes one look at the painting, and he brushes up one or two things, and he says, "Ma'am, there's your work." And she is absolutely in awe. She says, "Pablo, this is the best impression I've ever seen of myself. Thank you so much. Now, you did say it might cost you an arm and a leg. What's the cost?" So he reaches for his invoice book, he writes out an invoice, and he says, "There, man, $100,000. She falls off the pavement. She says, "But Pablo, I watched you sketch this thing for a few minutes, and suddenly it's 100,000. He says, "Ma'am, the part that you're missing is all of the years I spent honing my skill. The time I spent choosing these canvases, choosing the paints and the brushes. And so what you have seen is the end result." Okay? That 100,000 represents all of those efforts. Okay? So they then go on and haggle about the terms of payment, none of which is relevant for the purposes of the story. And so I'm going to quickly segue to what is called a competence model. And while all of us can never be a Pablo Picasso, the world that he lived in. And if you look at the competence model, how many of you have heard of the competence model? Okay. It describes a set of competencies. And then some people depict it as a pyramid. I don't like the pyramid because at the bottom of the pyramid is the mass of people, and then at the top, at the sharp end of the pyramid, is the few. Okay? And I always prefer to view it as a quadrant. So if you imagine these 4 boxes, and I start at the top left, okay? And all of us live in one of these boxes from time to time. So at the top left is what is called unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know, okay? So I'm a famous criminal lawyer, and a client walks into my office one day, or it won't be too long, so client walks into, okay, you're not panicking yet. Okay. Client walks into my office the one day, and they say, "Mzi, your reputation precedes you. I've been charged by the competition authorities with breaching Section A of the Competition Act, and I couldn't think of anyone better to represent me." And I think, Competition Act? I've never heard of such a thing. But on the other hand, I am Mzi. Okay? I say, "Ma'am, worry not. You've come to the right place." And off we go. Okay? And we get to the competition court, and they bring out all these articles and regulations, and I think, oh my gosh. Now, I'm not allowed to use expletives in polite company like this, but I think, what have I let myself into? Okay? So forget that the lady then gets convicted and all of what comes with that. but I am unconsciously incompetent. I do not know what I do not know. That's the quadrant I live in. But I now know. Next time someone comes along and says, Mzi, I've heard about your reputation. I have a competition problem. I say, ma'am, I know just the person to help you with that. And that person is not me, okay? I have now moved from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, because at least I know what I don't know, okay? And I've made a conscious decision to move from the one quadrant to the next, okay? And then from time to time, I start getting a few of these. Can I have it? Just bear with me. So I get a few of these competition-related queries. And I start thinking to myself, you know what? I'm actually getting a few of these. Now, I've heard there's a school called Henley somewhere, and maybe if I catch a bus from Whittlesea, they might enroll me for a course in competition, okay? And so I enroll myself, and I get myself certified. And I now know a thing or two about competition law. And so I change a plaque outside my office to say Mzi, criminal law advisors and competition law experts, okay? And so the next time someone comes along with a competition query, I can actually sit down confidently, listen to them, and give them some workable advice, okay? Because I now know my way around it, okay? I have now become consciously competent, is the quadrant that I'm now occupying, okay? And because I do that for such an extended period of time, and I do it so well, okay, I get to a stage where I can do it with my eyes closed. And there are subsets within competition law, and one of them is abuse of dominance. And the first thing that happens when there's an abuse of dominance complaint, the first thing on everyone's mind is, how quickly can I get to Mzi? Okay? And there is an absolute mad rush to get to me. Okay? The world that I now inhabit is that of unconscious competence. I do it with my eyes closed. That's the world that Picasso occupied. Okay? You can whip up a best work within a few minutes and charge an arm and a leg for it. Now, I don't know what areas all of you are in, but what I want to leave you with, all of you have what it takes to get to that world that Picasso occupied. And the one thing you don't ever want to become is what happened to a Kodak versus what happened with an Apple. All of you are nodding. You know the story of Kodak, okay? That actually Kodak was photography. And digital photography, believe it or not, was invented by a Kodak employee, okay? And when they presented it to their bosses, they said, not a chance. This thing will get us out of business, okay? And for a few more years, they continued to rake in millions, and guess what? They now no longer exist, okay? And yet Apple had one of their best sellers in their mobile product of an iPod, okay, where they digitized music. Okay, there was a few things that one had to do to get it onto the iPod, but it was a bestseller, okay? And at the time, the world of telephony was heavily occupied by the Ericssons of this world, the Nokias of this world, Motorola's of this world, Blackberries of this world. And they decided, we are going to enter that world of telephony. And I say telephony deliberately because theirs was a smartphone, okay? And they entered that world. And in so doing, completely cannibalized their own product in the form of an iPod. It doesn't exist anymore. They destroyed it, not someone else, okay? And those are the kinds of people that thrive in that infinite game that I spoke about, okay? Where today, their main competitors were not even in smartphones at the time. Samsung was an industrial powerhouse with an electronics division that then pivoted towards smartphones. That's who their competitor is now, okay? None of the others that I mentioned even, apart from Ericsson in networking, the rest of them, they're not in that space anymore, okay? And all I want to leave you with, it is all within you to become that unconscious, competent player who can thrive in the infinite game, whatever the world throws at us. Thank you all very much. Okay. So I see, Zoe, we may have run out of time, but I suspect you may allow a few questions.
I'm going to allow two. Can I just get an idea of hands? How many people have questions? Okay.
My question is, how did you build this ability to articulate yourself, the storytelling, the presence? Because you've got such a unique presence. Whatever you say, I want an eye from you. I will work for you. So I don't know if you like to share some tips for
Marco, charm will get you anywhere. That's what I'm saying. You know, when Lee, Zoe, and I were prepping for the session, Zoe was obviously far more in panicky mode than I am, having done a few of these things before. And she says to me, "But Z, where are your slides? Are you going to bring slides?" And I said, "Zoe, I tell stories, okay? If there's data-rich content, then I'm going to put up slides. But mine is to connect with people, okay? And yes, I'm a lawyer and we provide legal services, but actually the thing that keeps my clients coming back to me, I would like to think is as much the quality of our legal services as the interactions that we have. And so I am all about relationships and telling stories that connect with people, as opposed to coming here and rifling through a set of slides and saying, "Thank you all very much." And I want to tell relatable stories. And that's why in the one example that I made about those theories of personality traits, I can rifle through all of it with you. Okay? I found it confusing. And I've developed my own way of thinking about it. And that's the thing I chose to share with you. Okay? And so if there's one thing I can say to you, Marco, personalize your engagements with people. Get away from this corporate speak that all of us tend to go to finishing school and they tell you exactly where to start and how. You know, it works for some people. I'm a simple man from the Eastern Cape. Okay? And so I engage with people and I tell stories. I don't know if that answers you, Marco, but that's my answer to you.
Did you do any courses or did you just...
That's going to be a different masterclass. That's going to be next masterclass. Okay, one more. I've got room for one more question. I know you.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for the powerful masterclass. Okay, so to what extent do you adapt to change without compromising self? I know you spoke about the holy grains, which is private, public, and attributes, right?
Yes.
But to what extent do you find yourself not flip-flopping? Because, for instance, Trump wants BE to be gone. The next president will come and say, no, it's fine. So at what extent do you not compromise self?
Once again, great question. And my short answer to you is at great personal cost. That's all I can say to you. And the way that I'll amplify that is, a number of you are familiar with what happened during state capture, okay? And if you go through the records, mine is one of the few firms that actually wasn't implicated in any of those things that happened at Zonda. Not because we didn't have the opportunities, but there are a number of corporates who came to us with opportunities for legal work. And when we gave them our advice, they said to us, but Mzi, this doesn't help us. I said, but that's our advice. But surely you can find another way. I said, no, we can't. That's the position. And we had to forego millions in fees Why? Because someone else spoke about integrity. We were prepared. It's one thing to talk about integrity. You got to put it on the line, and that's where it gets tested. Okay? We can talk about it all you want, but where it gets tested is when there are consequences. And Lee will tell you, the decision we took every time was, you know what? We will be the poorer financially, but actually we'll be okay. Okay? And the other one I want to share with you very quickly is when COVID struck, okay, none of us had any idea what would happen, okay? And we were confronted with this for the first time and scratching our heads. And now here's the thing about COVID. I don't know how many of you remember. It was actually not an economic, there was nothing economic about COVID. It was all health with economic consequences. But the disaster itself was a health one, okay? And so people died. And the last thing you wanted to do was to come up with anything that might result in people dying. And because we had no idea where it might lead to, some of us were starting to think, but hang on a minute, what if this thing takes us out of business, okay? And some of our colleagues started retrenching in preparation of what might happen. And once again, Lee's here, the view that we took was, you know what? We may be this massive firm that we are, but ultimately, we are still a family. And so the first thing we did was to say to the firm, you know what? Whatever happens, there's not a single one of you who's going to lose their job on account of COVID. Take that to sleep. Okay? Okay. Okay. And so, because we didn't know what was coming, we also had to be responsible to say to ourselves, what impact might it have? We might have a fall off in revenue. If we don't, there's obviously going to be an impact on our cash flows. And so how do we rearrange our affairs? And so we went to some of our key suppliers and we negotiated with them either payment holidays or reduced payment terms. And I said to certain of our employees who were earning at a certain level, I'm going to cut your pay for a period until I know what this thing is going to do to us. And I said to my partners, for those of you at a junior level, I'm going to cut your pay by a certain percentage. And for those at a much more senior level, I'm going to cut by a significant percentage. And for the chairman and myself, we were going to go for as long as it took without taking any remuneration from the firm. Okay? And it's the easiest thing to do to talk. Okay? And Zoe says, yes, she was there. She's not remembering what I said. She's remembering what happened. Okay? I suspect you're going to kill me now. Because we're running out of time.
We do have to wrap up. Okay.
But thank you all very much. You've been an absolutely great sport. And
Amazing.
Zoe does have my contact details.
Yes.
I understand they're providing a free lunch, so I'm not one to miss up on a free lunch. So I'm going to be around for lunch, and then afterwards, unfortunately, I've got to head off. And so if there's any other things that you want to raise with me and with my colleague, Lee, by all means, we don't look grumpy when you disturb our lunch. Thank you all. Okay.
And Mzi, from Henley and from Lusaka and from the Lincoln Marley Foundation, this is a small token as a thank you. And I'm sure you all obviously completely thoroughly enjoyed that call. So please, that class. So please make sure that you do email your questions and engage further. This isn't the end of the conversation. This is just the end for now. Okay. Everybody, in terms of next steps.
Can I have my gift?
Walking up with this thing.
I'm looking forward to the thing.
Oh, God. Okay. In terms of next steps, everybody, we're going to do a big Q&A now with all of the speakers from the morning in the plenary in the blue room where you were in the morning. If you want to grab a quick snack and a quick something to drink, there's some sandwiches and drinks in the quad, so you can run down there and then run up the stairs again.
Thank you.